Thank you, Tim. Very restrained, Tim. I thought we may be able to be a little bit more, what can I say, activist.
Well, I mean, you can be. It's difficult. I'm a simple person, right? Expeditions are simple things. They're about getting to the top of something or the other side of something and achieving an outcome. And you put in place what's needed to achieve that outcome in a known time frame. That's it. Money, people, resources, know-how. Wearing my other hat, you go to these international dialogues and everybody's there on business class flights, drinking their water out of single-use plastic bottles, talking about the importance of not releasing carbon and using single-use plastic bottles and doing absolutely nothing. And, frankly, you get extremely tired of it. And at a personal level, I find it, pretty pathetic, really. But at a professional level, you need to continue to engage. And as I say, that's not directed at the people of Kamilar. There are many very good people involved. But collectively, the process, if you look at it from the macro scale, isn't getting the job done.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as a long-term activist, that it can be sometimes very frustrating. I want to say one thing about Kamilar. It's had, it gives out bottles for everyone to use to save the single-use plastic, and they're metal bottles. And most of us take the same bottle back every year, and that's been going on for about 12 years. So they have done that tiny little thing. They also no longer print out vast quantities of paper. It's all electronic, so that's a tiny little thing. But I think the thing with being an activist is that at some point, the decision needs to be made to deliver what it is that you want, the MPAs. And so that usually involves, law. It involves a government or an international body. And so at some stage, you have to play in that field as well. So being an activist actually involves more than just getting an issue on the table and keeping the pressure on. So that's just my little comment.
Yeah, and I don't envy anyone, particularly with the two people you're negotiating with, the Russians and the Chinese, who have proven themselves in many capacities to be unresponsive to a lot of world pressure. But I believe that from all of us, we need to engage with our local governments and I think work a hierarchical basis, because if Bob Hawke made that decision, I wasn't aware of that. It just goes to show that if people can get our electorates and our electorates can get to our members and our members can get to their counterparts internationally, we may be able to keep this whole process alive.
Can I make a comment?
In a small scale, Tim and I earlier on this, or late last year, we had a discussion where perhaps some of these MPAs, whilst still understanding that there's definitions are required, perhaps we could just make them no fishing zones for a period of time. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it is perfectly possible to stop fishing from going ahead in certain areas, because Kamilar requires consensus to approve a fishing proposal. It won't necessarily give you the broader protection that we want in an MPA, as in, climate resilience, etc. But we could stop fishing in some spaces. The difficulty that a number of Kamilar member countries have is that if a fishing notification has gone through all the hoops that it's supposed to go through, and it meets all the scientific requirements, etc., then they feel it's bad faith to say no. The trouble is, of course, that China and Russia are not playing good faith either. So, so at some stage, someone actually has to step up and play leadership. I think. I'll stop there.
I think the strength with a consensus-based approach is if the situation is the way you want it, then consensus protects it because it stops it easily being changed. The difficulty is the situation is not the way we want it, and it is difficult for us to change it to the way we want it because consensus is actually hindering our ability to do that. I'm sort of not suggesting we do away with consensus, but the question I think is probably aimed at Lynn is whether CAMLA represents the right international dialogue in which to make these sort of determinations. If it's not, who is? Because we certainly need progress in this area. The Australian government, if I can say so, the former Australian government, were very, very supportive of all the work, and my role really, together with Pew and many other people, was just to keep it on the agenda at CAMLA, especially during COVID, when it became a virtual conference with a reduced scope of work. But the bigger issue is, who's going to regulate the big players, the big international players?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I tried to say, the proponents of the existing marine protected areas in CAMLA, and in fact, pretty much everyone other than China and Russia, a couple of other countries are very quiet, but I don't think they'll block consensus. Pretty much everyone fully supports the MPAs, including the three that are on the table at the moment, which is why I was suggesting that we need to go beyond just lobbying our current members to maintain the MPA. I think there are a couple of things there. One is that often a country will fully support an MPA, but what Russia or China will do, particularly Russia, will play a game where they will propose to block a fisheries proposal unless no progress is made on an MPA. And most countries that are proponents of MPAs are also fishing nations. So we actually need to get them to think about which is more important here. Is it one vessel going down to fish for high-end fishery, or is it global ocean health and the global values that MPAs put up? And that's actually a really difficult question. The second comment I would make is that consensus has worked really well for CAMLA, and it's why we have so many very good measures within CAMLA at the moment. What we have now is not consensus. What we have now is veto. We have a situation where a country will say no, whereas what they're meant to do is say, we don't like that proposal, here is an alternative. Or how can we work to find something that we both agree on? And we actually have China and Russia sitting back and saying, we don't like that, you fix it. And I think that it's up to the other CAMLA members to stop tolerating that behaviour. And then the third comment is, which is why I mentioned pressure and from other organisations. I actually believe that CAMLA has the best structural process for delivering the best MPAs if we can get around the problem that we have at the moment, because I think that if it goes to United Nations, they will be watered down. However, a watered down network of MPAs is considerably better than no MPAs. So I think that there is quite an interesting game that I think we all need to play at the moment, which is getting the other organizations like the CBD, like the UN, High Seas MPA discussions to actually start pressuring CAMLA to do something about it. And if they don't do anything about it, then take over.
Thank you. On the other hand, or the other scale, we have my good friend Paul Watson with Sea Shepherd, who has been instrumental in reducing the quantity of whaling going on in the Southern Ocean, and perhaps maybe there is still some need for just plain old protest to keep getting this message across. But I think, Lynda, I'm very privileged and pleased that you could join us. Lynda Goldsworth has just completed her PhD on this subject, so I believe we have no better panelist to describe how these things can and should happen. So thank you very much for your comments,
Thank you.
Lynda, and I look forward to having more dialogue with you through the Blue Water Summit. And to Tim, thank you very much as well.